Okay guys, so kettlebell swings. Variation on the hip hinge movement that centers around explosive action of the hip extensor muscles, so your glutes, hamstrings and so on. It's a fantastic exercise for not only building strength within the hip joint but also work capacity and overall conditioning. So you want to start with the kettlebell out in front of you, about a foot away. Initiate the hip hinge position, so sit your hips back as if you're closing a set of drawers behind you, and keeping your abs tight and your back nice and flat. You're just going to reach forward and grab the kettlebell. From here, just pull and pass the kettlebell underneath your hips and then rapidly drive upwards, pushing your hips forward. Now the main focus is the movement of the hip joint, not the movement of the kettlebell. So we tend to use the cue that your hips are pushing the kettlebell forward rather than lifting it up with your arms. It also doesn't matter too much how high the kettlebell goes. People often make the mistake of lifting it right above the heads. You're simply driving your hips forward, squeezing your glutes and pushing the kettlebell out in front of you, and then from here pulling it back down underneath your hip joint, letting your hips sit back and returning back to the start position by driving your hips forward. Main focus is to keep your abs tight, relax your arms and keep your weight distribution over the middle of your foot. A good cue to see that you are using your hips effectively is if you pull the weight down harder on each rep, you shouldn't feel like you're going to lose your balance. If you feel like you're going to fall forward or backwards, it's because you're using your lower back and your arms rather than your hip joint. So you should be centered and rooted to the ground over the middle of your foot, simply sinking your hips back with the kettlebell underneath your hip joint and then driving forward and squeezing your glutes at the top of each rep. This exercise is also performed for time or really high reps, so make sure you're focusing on your form throughout the course of the whole set. Okay guys, so the press up exercise. Great exercise for the upper body, particularly within the horizontal push movement. It also works your core, shoulders and chest really well. So, I'm going to start by assuming the full press up position. Hands are directly beneath the shoulders, body is straight, glutes and abs are tight, and to start with your feet slightly outside your shoulder width. From here, you want to initiate the movement by pushing up slightly, lifting your chest away from the floor as high as you can. This is just going to activate a muscle known as your serratus, and it's just going to help stabilize your shoulder. Making sure that your abs stay tight, you want to focus on slowly lowering your chest down to the floor. Key cue that I tend to use with a lot of people, particularly beginners, is to focus on lowering your chest before your hips, just to make sure that you're keeping the load through your chest and shoulders. When you get to the top position, just repeat lowering down into the next rep. You can also perform this exercise by letting your chest sink towards the ground slightly, squeezing your shoulder blades together. This is just going to place a little bit more emphasis on the chest and arms and take away from the shoulders. All the other common principles are the same, so keeping your glutes and abs tight, focusing on keeping your body straight and your shoulders directly above the wrists.